Some betrayals don't come with fire and thunder. They come with a whisper, a small shift in rhythm, a glance that lingers too long, a laugh that lands wrong. That's how it started for me. My name's Thomas. I'm a man who believes in showing up, to work, to marriage, to life. I'm not flashy, and I never needed the world's applause. I build things with my hands, custom woodwork, cabinets mostly. There's a certain honesty in working with something solid. You know where the lines are. You know when something fits, and when it doesn't. Alyssa used to say she loved that about me. That I was dependable. The kind of man who didn't just promise, but followed through. But something in her started shifting about a year ago. It wasn't sudden. More like a slow dimming. The kind you don't notice until you realize you're sitting in the dark. It began when she joined that new gym a couple towns over, VitaFit. I remember the way she talked about it. It's not just some place with machines and mirrors, she said. Her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in a while. It's about focus, strength, pushing yourself. I smiled. Sounds like you're training for battle. She laughed, but it wasn't the easy laugh I'd known for years. It was thinner, more distant. In a way, I wanted to be supportive. Marriage means cheering each other on, right? So I didn't think twice when she started going every evening. Then mornings. Then twice a day on weekends. Helps me clear my head, she'd say. I believed her. At first. But I noticed the little things. She stopped leaving her phone out in the open. Started locking it, face down. Her messages, once casual and read in plain sight, now lived behind passwords. She came home tired but glowing. Not the kind of glow you get from cardio. Something else. Like someone had looked at her a little too long, and she liked it. Still, I said nothing. That's who I am. I listen. I watch. I wait. You don't build strong cabinets by rushing to work, and you don't jump to conclusions without enough pieces to the puzzle. One night, I needed to print an invoice. Her laptop was open on the kitchen island. Normally, I wouldn't touch it. But it was already on, so I clicked over. That's when I saw it. An open tab. Instagram. A message thread. The name was Dante. Don't forget how good you look today. A heart emoji. I stared at it for a full minute. Not rage. Not panic. Just stillness. The kind you feel before a storm rolls in. It wasn't outright cheating, not yet. But it sure as hell wasn't harmless. I closed the laptop gently. I didn't want her to know I'd seen it. That night, I didn't say a word. She came in from her shower, hair damp, smelling of lavender and something new. Some scent I didn't recognize. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and sat beside me like nothing had changed. But something had. Not between us. That part had changed already. Something changed inside me. I stopped assuming. Started watching. A carpenter knows when the grain of the wood isn't right, even if the surface looks polished. And something about our marriage, our routines, our silences, wasn't right. They say trust is built slowly, like a house, one brick at a time. But when it cracks, it doesn't crumble slowly. It collapses all at once, and quiet. I didn't confront Alyssa after I saw the message. Not because I was afraid of what she'd say, but because I already knew what she wouldn't. The truth doesn't come easy from someone already hiding. Instead, I made a quiet choice. I would watch. Not like a jealous man watching his wife, but like a craftsman studying a structure he once trusted, now realizing it might not be as solid as it looked. The name Dante stayed with me. I rolled it around in my mind like a rough stone in my pocket. Short. Flashy. Probably full of himself, a man who knew how to perform. A trainer. Muscles, sweat, charm. He was everything a woman like Alyssa might get starry-eyed about, especially if she felt like something was missing at home. Maybe she did. I can admit that. But a void doesn't justify a lie. The next morning, she left early for her core and cardio class. Said she'd stop by a juice bar after. I nodded, kissed her forehead like I always did. But when she left, I didn't go back to bed. Instead, I followed her. I stayed a couple cars behind. Took my old pickup, the one she always teased me about for being too loud and too slow. I kept my distance. Watched her pull into the VitaFit parking lot right at 6:58 a.m. Dante was already outside, shirt tight, hairstyled like he cared a little too much. He had that look, the kind of man who knew women looked at him. The kind of man who lived for it. When Alyssa got out of the car, he hugged her. Not the kind of hug you give a client. Not side-armed or polite. It was full, both arms. His hand lingered on the small of her back. Her body leaned into his like she'd done it a dozen times before. I stayed in my truck and didn't move. They walked inside together. She didn't look back once. That image stayed in my head the rest of the day, more than the messages, more than the missed dinners or locked phones. That hug said everything. It said they were already past a line. Maybe not the final one, but past enough. Still, I didn't speak. I worked, measured and cut wood with more focus than usual, sanded down edges until my hands ached. That night, she came home with a smoothie in her hand and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Told me about some fictional client she met. Gave me a half-hearted kiss and said she was tired. Went straight to bed. I sat in the kitchen a while after she left the room. Just me, the dim light over the stove, and that quiet pressure behind my ribs. I wasn't angry. I was awake. There's a difference. I opened her laptop again. More messages from Dante. Wish I could see you outside the gym more. Last night was something. Alyssa replied with a laughing face and, we need to be careful, winking face. That was the moment I knew. Not suspected. Knew. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I didn't even feel the heat rise in my chest. I closed the laptop, walked to the garage, and sat on the workbench where I'd shaped oak into furniture for 10 years. My hands touched the tools like they were the only honest things in the world. There's a moment in betrayal when your heart stops breaking and starts building something else, resolve. And from that moment on, you're not the same man you were the day before. Some truths cut deeper not because they're shocking, but because they confirm what you already feared. After that night, I stopped pretending. I knew what Alyssa and Dante were. The denial was gone. The guessing game was over. What came next wasn't revenge. It wasn't confrontation. It was clarity. I started noticing more, now that I'd let myself see it. Her routines weren't routines, they were cover stories. Her eyes didn't meet mine anymore. Not the way they used to. When she hugged me, her arms stayed light. Just enough to say, I care, but not enough to feel it. One morning, while she was in the shower, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and just looked at her phone sitting on the dresser. Locked, of course. She used to laugh that I didn't even have a passcode on mine. She once said trust was everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't try to unlock it. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. The late nights, the shift in her energy, the way she smiled at texts like they were private jokes. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't blind. I was just still. A few days later, I stopped by a diner after a job up north. Ordered coffee and eggs, nothing special. That's when I saw him. Dante. He was sitting at the corner table, in gym gear like always, talking loud on his phone, voice full of himself. Even without knowing the man, I could smell the ego from across the room. I watched him for a while. He wasn't alone. He was with another woman. Blonde. Fit. Too young for him, probably. She laughed at something he said, and he leaned in close. That's when it hit me. Alyssa wasn't special to him. She was a type. I knew the kind of man Dante was. I'd seen his kind in high school, in bars, and broken marriages. He wasn't a partner. He was a performer. All charm and teeth and angles. The kind of man who says what you want to hear until someone else listens harder. It didn't make the betrayal any softer, but it shifted something inside me. It made me realize this wasn't about me. It wasn't that I'd failed. It was that she'd fallen for someone who couldn't give her anything real and gave herself away to chase it. That night, I didn't follow her. I didn't check her messages. Instead, I took out a notebook and made 2 lists. One was titled, What I Know. The other, What I Want Next. It's strange, but there's a peace that comes with facing the truth. A steadying. Like standing in a burned-down house and realizing you can rebuild. You don't need to shout about the fire. You just need to clear the ashes and pick up a hammer. Some men waste years asking why. But I've learned, if you stare too long at the wreckage, you forget you still have hands strong enough to build something better. There's a strange kind of calm that settles in once you accept the truth. Like the moment after a storm, wet ground, broken branches, and silence. Not peace exactly, but a place you can finally stand. That's where I was. I didn't need more proof. I didn't need to catch Alyssa in the act. She was already gone in every way that mattered. And still, I wasn't looking to humiliate her. That's not who I am. I just needed the truth spoken aloud for both of us. Because there's a dignity in naming what's real, even when it hurts. I chose a Tuesday night. She was home, sitting on the couch with her legs tucked under her, scrolling her phone like always. The TV was on, but she wasn't watching. I sat across from her. Quiet. Steady. She looked up, surprised by the stillness in the room. Everything okay? She asked. I nodded once. I need to ask you something, and I want you to really answer it. She tilted her head, wary. Okay. Are you sleeping with Dante? Silence. Not a gasp. Not a denial. Just stillness. Her face didn't even register shock. Only the fear of being seen. She swallowed, eyes darting away. Why would you? I held up a hand. Don't lie. Please. Not now. Another pause. Then the look changed. That mask she'd been wearing, of innocence, of confusion, it cracked. Her shoulders dropped. She looked down. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said. It just did. I nodded. How long? A few months. I let that land. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. The worst part wasn't the cheating itself. It was how easily she'd lived with it. How smoothly the lie had woven into our everyday life. Why him? I asked. You know what kind of man he is. She looked at me, like she wanted to argue, but couldn't. He made me feel, noticed, like I mattered. I don't know. I was lonely, Tom. I felt the weight of that, not as an excuse, but as a fact. Marriage can get quiet. Routine. People drift if they don't anchor themselves. But you don't fix loneliness by burning down your home. You speak up, you work, or you leave with honesty. I stared at her a long moment. I would have forgiven almost anything, if you just told me. Her eyes welled, but I didn't comfort her. That ship had already sailed. I'm not going to fight you, I said, and I'm not going to scream. But I'm done living with someone who doesn't respect me. She nodded. Quiet tears. That night, I didn't pack a bag. I didn't storm out. I just stood up, grabbed my keys, and drove to the only place that had never lied to me, my workshop. I spent the night there, sanding down a slab of walnut I'd been saving for something special. I didn't know what yet, but I knew it would be mine. When a man chooses truth over comfort, he doesn't just lose a marriage, he gains himself. And from that, a whole new life can be built. Ending a marriage isn't like pulling a fire alarm. It's not loud, not dramatic, not if you're doing it the right way. It's more like shutting off a machine that's been running in the background too long. The silence after is jarring, but clean. After that night, Alyssa and I spoke little. We lived in the same house, but like ghosts passing through. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just stillness. She stayed in the guest room. I stayed gone most nights, working longer hours or crashing in the back office of my shop. The decisions came slowly, but steadily. I called a lawyer. Told him I didn't want to gut her financially. I wasn't interested in punishing her. I just wanted peace. The house could be hers. I'd start over somewhere else. He paused. You sure about that? I built this house, I said. I can build another. The paperwork started. She didn't fight it. I think part of her expected more drama, more emotion, but the absence of it said everything. She tried to talk, once or twice. Tom, she said, standing in the hallway one evening. I made a mistake. I didn't look at her. Just nodded. Yeah, you did. There wasn't much left to say. When someone chooses another person, lies about it, and then cries only when they get caught, that's not regret. That's consequence. Meanwhile, word started getting out. Small town. Whispers carry. I never told anyone what happened, but others put it together. Her gym visits. Dante's reputation. He wasn't exactly discreet. I'd heard from 2 clients that he'd been caught texting women he trained, one of them married too. So it wasn't a surprise when, a few weeks after our separation started, Alyssa came home looking hollow. Dante's been distant, she said, almost like she wanted me to react. I didn't. Turns out, he'd moved on to another client. Blonder, younger, more likes on her photos. Whatever currency that kind of man trades in. Alyssa didn't say it, but I could see it written all over her. The realization that she wasn't the exception. She was just next in line. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because she was hurting, but because I wasn't tied to it anymore. I was free of it. I started planning for the move. Found a small plot of land just outside town. Nothing flashy, just space and quiet. Enough for a new shop, and a place to build something that was mine alone. Not a fresh start. A real one. Some endings don't need revenge. The weight of consequence is heavy enough. And when you walk away clean, carrying only your name, that's power. There's a quiet dignity in starting over. Not the kind you see in movies, where someone burns their past to the ground and dances in the ashes. That's just noise. The real kind, the kind that sticks, looks like early mornings, sore hands, and no one clapping for you but yourself. I bought the land. Just over 2 acres on the edge of town, where the trees were thick enough to mute the road noise, and the soil was soft enough to work with. It was raw, overgrown, needed clearing. Perfect. I didn't hire a crew. I didn't need one. I needed the work. The sweat. The motion. Some people go to therapy. I picked up a saw and cut my way back to myself. Every day, I'd leave just after dawn, thermos in hand, and work until dark. I laid the foundation myself. Poured it with help from an old buddy I used to frame houses with, back before I opened my shop. We didn't talk much. Just worked. That kind of silence means more than words sometimes. It wasn't just a house I was building. It was a line in the sand. This is where the old life ends. This is where the new one begins. Meanwhile, Alyssa tried to reach out. A few texts. A voicemail or two. One showed up out of nowhere while I was laying out flooring material in the back of my truck. I thought maybe we could talk. I looked at her, really looked, for the first time in weeks. She looked tired. Makeup hiding what it could. Eyes scanning me like a woman trying to find her way back to something already gone. I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. I was lost, she said, voice small. You were always so steady. I took it for granted. That part stung. Not because it hurt, but because it was true. I was steady. The man who came home, paid bills, made dinner, showed up. That kind of love isn't loud. It's not spark and chaos. It's presence. But she wanted spark. And she got burned. Maybe I didn't shine the way you wanted, I said. But I never lied. I never looked somewhere else. She blinked, then nodded. I know. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. I think, deep down, she knew the door had closed. And I wasn't going to reopen it out of nostalgia or loneliness. I watched her walk away, back to her car, back to the life she picked. The life that didn't look so golden now. I turned back to the boards in my truck. There was still light left in the day. Still work to do. And that work was mine. When you rebuild something with your own hands, every nail, every board, every step forward, it reminds you that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just shows up every damn day. By late fall, the frame of the house stood tall. The walls weren't closed in yet, and the roof was still waiting on shingles, but I could see it, the shape of a home. One I built with hands that had known both love and loss. Nothing borrowed. Nothing faked. I'd never felt more grounded. Most evenings, I'd sit on the porch beam with a thermos and listen to the wind stir the trees. I didn't feel lonely out there. I felt solitary. There's a difference. Lonely is hunger. Solitary is peace. And it was in that stillness that something unexpected happened. Her name was Claire. She worked at the local hardware supply. I'd seen her plenty of times, behind the counter, always quick with a pin behind her ear and sawdust on her sleeves. Not flashy, not loud, but sharp. Present. We talked once when I couldn't find a specific hinge I needed. She walked me straight to it, explained the specs like she'd used it herself, and probably had. After that, I started noticing her more. Or maybe I just stopped looking past her. She didn't ask about my divorce. Didn't pry. But one afternoon, as she was ringing me up for sealant and deck screws, she looked me in the eye and said, "You've been through it, huh?" I just nodded. She didn't look away. "You seem strong, but tired." That one hit deep. Not because it hurt, but because it was the first thing anyone had said that felt honest. Everyone else either whispered behind my back or avoided the topic altogether. I started swinging by the store a little more often after that. At first for parts. Then for no reason at all. Just conversation. Simple, steady. Like laying the first plank of a deck, when you're not sure you'll finish, but you're willing to start. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was something gentler. Respect. Meanwhile, Alyssa sent one last text. He left. Guess I was just another notch. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. But because by then, her words no longer landed. I wasn't standing in that chapter anymore. She had chosen the fire. I had walked through it. And now, I was building on the other side. Claire came out to the site once, brought coffee and stood next to me as I showed her the blueprints. She ran her hand along the railing I just installed and smiled. You've got an eye for clean lines, she said. I smiled back. I like things that hold up. Sometimes, healing doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with small, steady hands. With someone who sees you not as broken, but rebuilding. By early winter, the house was nearly done. It wasn't grand, 2 bedrooms, open kitchen, wide porch, oak floors I milled myself. But every inch of it was mine. Every corner told the truth. Nothing borrowed, nothing hidden. Sometimes I'd run my hand along the grain of the finished wood and think, this is what honesty feels like. Claire started coming around more. Brought her dog once, an old mutt named Murphy who looked like he'd seen some things too. Fit right in. We didn't label whatever was happening between us. Didn't need to. It grew the way good things do, without forcing, without pretending. We drank coffee on the porch, swapped stories about past jobs, past scars. She'd been through her own mess, a long relationship with someone who never showed up the way she needed. I used to think it was me, she told me once, that I just asked for too much. You didn't, I said. She looked at me like she believed that for the first time in a long while. Meanwhile, Alyssa's presence faded. She sold the house, moved to a condo closer to the city. I heard bits and pieces from mutual friends. Dante had dropped her fast, just like he'd done with others. Some woman at the gym told folks he'd started dating a 20-something influencer, and that Alyssa stopped showing up altogether. I didn't gloat. That's not in me. But I'll admit, it felt like balance returning. Not karma. Just gravity. You step off something solid long enough, eventually you fall. One night, I got a letter in the mail. From Alyssa. Handwritten. It was short. You were always the good one. I didn't see it until I was already too far gone. I hope your new life brings you peace. I won't bother you again. I read it once, then put it away. She was right about one thing, she didn't see it. Not until I stopped being hers. And now? Now I had a new house, built with my own hands. A woman who met me where I stood. No illusions. No games. Claire came by that weekend with a bottle of wine and a second-hand housewarming gift, a carved wooden sign that said, "Home is where you're finally seen." I hung it in the kitchen. We sat at the table and ate simple food, laughed about small things, and when the silence came, it didn't feel empty. It felt full. Healing isn't about finding someone new. It's about becoming someone new, or maybe just becoming who you were before someone made you question your worth. Some mornings I'd wake before sunrise, sit on the porch with coffee, and just listen. No plans. No pressure. Just the sound of wind through trees and the steady quiet of a life earned the hard way. It had been months since the split was finalized. The house was finished. The furniture all built by hand, oak table, walnut shelves, pine trim around the windows. Every board had been touched by me, shaped with care, with purpose. It's funny how something broken can become the thing that clears your vision. I used to think betrayal would define me, that I'd wear it like a scar across my chest. But standing in that new home, feeling the air move through it, it didn't feel like a scar. It felt like a hinge. Everything turned on that moment, and I'd stepped through. Claire stayed the same, solid, grounded. She never asked for more than I could give. Never rushed anything. That kind of patience is rare. And when you've been lied to, patience feels like honesty. We'd started doing more things together. Driving into the hills on weekends. Cooking meals with music playing low. Laughing at things that didn't need to be funny, just shared. There was comfort in the smallness of it. The simplicity. One night, as we stood in the kitchen washing dishes, she looked at me and said, "You seem lighter these days." I smiled. I think I am. It wasn't about her. It wasn't even about the new life. It was about knowing that I'd walked through fire and hadn't let it turn me bitter. That's the real test, isn't it? Not just surviving betrayal, but choosing not to become like the one who broke you. I didn't chase revenge. Didn't air out our marriage online. Didn't drag her name through the dirt. I just left and kept walking. Alyssa stayed quiet, true to her word. I heard she was seeing someone new, but I didn't care. That chapter didn't pull at me anymore. It was closed, not slammed shut in anger, but gently latched in acceptance. I didn't forgive her to free her. I forgave her to free myself. And now? Now, when I lay down at night, the silence in the room isn't empty. It's peaceful. You don't rebuild a life with anger in your hands. You build it with stillness, with intention, with the kind of strength that never needs to shout to be heard. I never set out to become a different man. I just wanted to be okay again. But somewhere along the way, between the lies, the leaving, the rebuilding, I became someone else. Not unrecognizable. Just clearer. Sharper around the edges. More myself than I'd ever been. Life looks different now. There's no clock to race. No house full of tension. No wondering where someone is when their phone lights up after midnight. Just the hum of the wind outside, the creak of wood settling in the home I built, and the steady rhythm of a life I trust. Claire's here more often now. Not living with me. Not yet. But close. She brings food, stories, warmth. We laugh more than we talk about the past. But when it comes up, we don't flinch. We've both seen what disappointment looks like. It makes honesty easier and quieter. We're not trying to fill old holes with new distractions. We're just building something new together. Something clean. A few people in town still ask what happened between me and Alyssa. I just say, we went different ways. And that's the truth. No bitterness. No gossip. Just two people who stopped being good for each other. One who left honestly, the other who didn't. I don't carry her choices anymore. She made them. And I made mine. That's the thing about betrayal. It strips away all illusions. But if you let it, it can also strip away the parts of you that were willing to settle for less than you deserve. I don't need validation from anyone. I don't need to prove I won. Because the truth is, no one wins betrayal. But you can walk away without losing yourself. You can rebuild. You can love again. You can sit on a quiet porch with a steady heart and know you made it through. This home, this life, this version of me, none of it would exist if I hadn't been forced to start over. And strange as it sounds, I'm grateful. Not for the pain, but for what it revealed. Because now I know. I'm not a victim. I'm not just a man who was cheated on. I'm a man who stood in the wreckage, cleared it with his own hands, and built something stronger in its place. Not all endings break you. Some break you open. And what you build afterward, if you're brave enough to stay honest, will be the truest thing you ever make.